Okay, welcome.
Yay.
Yay. So yeah, we started this. Nancy and I have been talking, actually, we've been talking for a couple of years, but we called it DEI for real. DEI obviously is diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we are not giving up on. And then what we wanted to do in these sessions is reassure you, educate you a little bit, show you ways that you can activate so you can be a leader in this effort. So this is us. And Nancy, I'm going to introduce Nancy, and Nancy will introduce me. So Nancy is oh, and I didn't print out that page. Darn it. I'm going to have to
We
do
could
it.
always just introduce ourselves
I know
if need be.
we could. I thought it would be nice to have us introduce each other, but yeah, let's introduce ourselves this time. I'm Chris Jones, one of the co-founders of Spectra Diversity, and we have a DEI assessment. We have DEI tools like a facilitation kit. We have a blog, and we also have partners. And we've got two kinds of partners. We've got facilitators that are partners, and we also have coaches that are partners. And so if someone is looking for a coach or a facilitator, we have them. And that's me. Nancy, go ahead.
And I'll try to keep this brief as well so that we can get right into the meat of things. But I'm Nancy Schick of Third Ear Conflict Resolution. I'm an employment attorney licensed in New York, and I do global workplace mediation because you can do these things online. And so my whole goal is to keep employers and employees talking so that they don't end up in court.
Okay. And why DEI for real now? Because, as Nancy just said, you have better places to be than in court. And there's so much misinformation. People are complying early when they don't have to, but so we're going to help you around that. And there's the current administration, one of the philosophies is move fast and break things. And there's quite a bit of chaos, both in the streets and online and in companies and in homes. It's everywhere. So let's start with the reassure part. DEI and the talent life cycle is our topic today. And DEI, we know it's under attack. DEI is not dead. We know that. And although this happened, the OMB, assisted by the Attorney General, shall coordinate the termination of all discriminatory programs, including illegal DEI. So we're going to talk about what is legal and what is illegal in terms of employment. And I'm going to make this hide thumbnail. I'm just moving my screen around. I'm usually in a different place and I've got two screens, so I'm looking back and forth, back and forth. But today I have one screen, so it's a little confusing for this single person. So ending, but there's still tips out there. And this one is from, I think that, yeah, the Department of Commerce. So even though the federal, the .gov websites are pretty much all scrubbed, there's still a few that haven't gotten to it yet. And this is one, there's 10 tips for boosting diversity and inclusion in recruitment and hiring. So, and this is one of my favorite people to quote from, Arthur Chan. And this is, you know, this is in contrast to some of the misinformation. DEI is not anti-white. It's not charity work. It's not PR and marketing. It's not reverse discrimination. It's not reactionary. It's not about showing favoritism. DEI is an intersectional approach to cultural and systems change. And I love that. It's a very precise definition. It's not something that would just roll off your tongue, but it's a very good one. So this is what I want you to do first. Those of you that are here, what are your concerns about hiring and promotions? considering the current anti-DEI efforts. And you join at, you can either like use your smartphone and do that screen thing, or you can just join at slido.com and that number. So I'm not going to do it because I have something else queued up on my phone, but maybe, Nancy, you can get people.
I'll get in there.
Okay. So, and this is, we want to know what you're concerned about, what you're worried about, either in the training that you're doing or internally to your organization. So I've got people typing. Oops. Go back.
Oh, it just disappeared.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I was looking for it and I didn't see anything, so I thought maybe I was doing it wrong. Do you see anything?
Oh, okay, it came back up.
Okay. Well, I've got people typing, but I don't see anything. Well, thank you for typing, people that are typing.
Mine are
Oh,
long, it's not a word, so.
there they are. Belonging, clients, employees thinking they don't have biases. Oh my goodness. Employers not seeing their own biases. Oh boy, howdy. One of the things in the Spectra data that we have is that management typically is not in tune with the rest of the employees in their company. They usually think things are going better than they are. Employers worrying about reverse discrimination. Yeah, I hear all this. Not hiring diverse leadership, fear. That's how I've just started reading a book called On Tyranny by Tim Snyder, maybe. And one of the ways that tyranny happens is with fear, just making people afraid of everything. Yeah, so thank you. Yes, yes. And this will be in the recording. These comments will show up there. Thank you. Any thoughts on these, Nancy?
I have thoughts on all of them.
I know.
But I'll try to keep it succinct because I think we're going to get into this, is that the conversations really have not changed that much as far as what we need to be doing. And I think that's where a lot of this break things, distract, make people fearful, et cetera. That's why we're even doing this series, is to remind people that although out there's a lot going on. If you're in the federal government, if you're a federal contractor, there is a little bit higher concern, right? Because you have been directly named in some of the executive orders. But for the majority of us, it should be business as usual. And I think, oh, actually, Anthony, would you be willing to repeat what you talked about earlier of how you're addressing this with your clients?
Oh, that'd be good.
Sure, sure. Uh, Appreciate it. Anthony Arrington. I'm a consultant. I own a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging consultant and assessment firm in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I work across the country. And we've been talking about the hit we've all had, as people that are in this space. I was talking with Chris and Nancy, and one of the things I've been advising many of my clients on, and I would advise you all, if you have opportunities to speak to your employers or your own clients, is of it's important that I take my personal opinion out, because I already know how I feel. That's very simple for me, right? This is a no-brainer. But as I'm advising clients, the question becomes, as a facilitator, It's not my job to make you decide what to do. I can't change you. It's your job. But I can tell you that there are two paths that you need to think about. You need to think about the fork in the road, which there's a legal path and there's a moral path. And so which do you want to talk about first? And if whatever the client wants to talk about, if you want to talk about the legal path, well, let's talk about that. Have you broken any laws? Is there any legislation that's passed, signed into law, legally forcing you to make change? The answer is yes or no. Well, okay, it's yes. Then let's talk about that. What are they? And let's talk about how you're addressing those. If not, the answer is no. Okay, so you haven't broken any laws. So now the decision is yours on whether you want to comply with statements and legislation that hasn't been signed into law, or you want to take your other path, which is your moral path. And the moral path to me says, do you believe today what you believed yesterday? And will you believe tomorrow what you believe today? If you can answer yes to both of those questions, then now you have a decision to make. You've already explained that you haven't broken any laws. So now your question as leaders and as an organization is, what are you going to do morally for the people of your organization? I can't answer that for you, but those are the questions that you have to think about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was very succinct. And I know we're all kind of struggling with that same topic to when we're talking with clients. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So this is executive orders in the talent life cycle. And this is a little bit of repeat from our last one. So I'm just going to do this very quickly. And this is, what is a executive order and what power does it have and compared to law? And what does, I think the one that we're looking at mostly today is perhaps judicial review, Nancy? Or maybe
Yes,
enforcement and reach. That's another big one.
yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't hear the full thing that you said.
Oh, I was just
Oh,
I was just
enforcement and
wondering what,
reach. Okay.
yeah, what would
I
judicial
forgot I can
review-
read the captions.
Oh, they're there. Yeah, enforcement and reach, I'm thinking of with, that's based on, I mean, right now, enforcement with the National Guard, that's enforcement. But it's not a law, or is
Right.
it a law?
And we're talking about, there's also enforcement at what's going on in California is not necessarily DEI, like it's not a DEI ban we're talking about. So I think there's
Right,
we
right.
have to remember that too, that it's very easy to, yes, go
Yeah,
down the road of what in law we call that the parade of horribles, right? And look, we've seen people actually walk that parade of horribles and have horrible things happen. So we have to be aware of the worst case scenario while also recognizing where we are currently and where we can take action. And that's why we decided to do this series, is to remind you that yes, the media wants clicks. They want to be able to show you ads. That's their business model. So I'm not saying that that's terrible, and we all are smart enough people here to manage that, but I think we have to be aware that this is all being kind of orchestrated to distract us and get us fearful so that maybe we don't notice where we can take action. We don't notice things that we could stop from happening. We're so busy focusing on, maybe one or two people in the whole country, and which might be very important because you might be one of those two people. So we don't want to forget about you, but we all have, like, there are a lot of us, and we all have power. And if we're engaged in these conversations and we're taking action within our realm where we have power, we can still make a difference. We can still go forward with our DEI initiatives, and there's still a lot that we can do. So this is again, part of why we're doing this is because we know this, and look, Chris and I need to be reminded of this as well. So all of you here are helping us keep that community together so that we can take productive action and further the things that we want to see.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Here, click. Okay, hiring. So this is one thing that really bugs me is when they talk about somebody being a DEI hire, because diversity refers to a group, not a person. So a group is diverse. A person isn't diverse by themselves. They're a person. So diversity is a group. So DEI hire, it should be a non-thing.
And I'm going to throw in that for those of you out there, I'm going to be listening for my legal colleagues, right? I want you all listening for these cases as well. That look, DEI hire should be considered at this point a slur, right? It should be considered a slur, and that should be an indicator of some sort of discrimination going on. So all you lawyers out there in my world, hear that and be listening for those cases, because that's the way I hear that.
And that's the way I hear it too, as a slur. Bias in recruiting, and there's a number of instances of this, and I actually looked up just a couple I want to bring up because Nancy's the expert here, but I was remembering Target, which is founded and headquartered in Minneapolis, where I am. And in 2006, they lost a case, and it was, I believe it was on EEOC grounds. And what they did is they had bias against names. So there were names that sounded African American, sounded Black, and they didn't invite those people to interview. So they didn't even get to the interview stage. They also were discriminating for Black HBCUs and HBCUs and
I think you said fraternities and
and
sororities, and
fraternities and
maybe some affinity
sororities.
groups that might have
Yep,
shown up,
yep,
volunteering,
yep.
different things like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the other one was Coca-Cola, and this is more recent, but they were fined $192 million. And theirs was also African American employees, but it was in the promotions that the people that were Black African American weren't getting promoted up the ladder, and they lost. That was a big one. So Ivy League schools is another another example that a colleague of mine brings up all the time is Ivy League school. That's a really small percentage of the people that you can hire. And would you rather have somebody that graduated, top of their class from the U of M, or, in the bottom or the middle of their class of an Ivy League school? So there's Ivy League is a problem. Name discrimination, we just talked about. Age, gender, sexual orientation, ability, all of those. It happens. So who is in control? This is one of the big ones. Who's doing the outreach and the interviews and the decision making? And a lot of times there's not even a set there's not even a set of guidelines. They're just like, oh, that person feels like they could be a culture match. Well, what is a culture match? And how is it defined? And who defined it? And then who is in the interviewing process? Sometimes it's one person, and their bias can absolutely impact things. So one of the consensus is to make sure that you have a job description that has measurable um, measurable measurable uh, oh my goodness,
It's a measurable objectives.
thank you,
So
measurable, yes.
yeah, sorry, I'm going to jump in because hey, it's Monday morning. We've had,
I know, and
but
yeah,
I think you know, the way that I like to work with this, and I've been anticipating this for a while, and I do see that we're moving in that direction, is that it's similar to the ADA standard, right? The Americans with Disabilities Act standard is you want to be looking at, can the candidate perform the essential functions of the job? Which means you first have to define what those are. And real quickly, while I have the floor, I just want to also mention that although we've brought up Ivy League schools as one of the biases a lot of employers have, that does not necessarily mean that you're discriminating unlawfully. But where that comes in is we do, not surprisingly, find that a lot of people use that as kind of pretext to look for privileged people, basically white people, right? They look for certain names, they look for certain pedigree, and we have this conversation of they're somehow better candidates. And what we're asking employers to do is just broaden your search for candidates, because we've talked about this a lot in my world as well, that you may miss people who went to, for example, a state school, but they had a lot of start and stop during their education because maybe they were also taking care of a parent, raising some children, maybe they were fighting their own illness, and they overcame all those obstacles. And that might be a really great hire for you, because I'm guessing in your workplace, you probably are going to have to overcome some obstacles. So that's where that comes in. It's not per se unlawful discrimination, but this is a conversation about broadening your scope for your recruiting so that you're getting great candidates and giving opportunities to people that maybe didn't have a scholarship to Harvard or whatever Ivy League opportunity. That doesn't necessarily mean that they lack the capabilities of performing the essential functions of a job.
The last bullet, thank you, Nancy. The last bullet there is salary fixed and not negotiable. So this would be to examine your vacancy announcement, both internal and external, to make sure it's inclusive. And the studies show that men will apply for a job when they meet 60% of the qualifications, but women only apply when they meet 100% of them. So separate your must-haves and your nice-to-haves so you see what skills are actually necessary. And don't take the, women are also less likely to negotiate their salary compared to men. And so the lower salary that they start with, even though they continue getting raises at, reasonable amounts, they're always going to be behind the men. So sorry,
And
man.
I got to jump in again on that one. Sorry, but
Oh, that's okay.
yeah,
You're
it's
the
just because
lawyer.
what I want people to hear in that is these are studies that have shown that, but don't automatically attach that study as truth. That's one of the problems that I think we have with a lot of studies, right? Is that immediately you go, oh, women this, men that. And that gets us already walking down the road of bias and discrimination and not looking at objective criteria for jobs. So I just wanted to point that out because I think it's a great opportunity to go, oh, right, how many times do I do that where I say, oh, because I'm a certain age or I'm a certain race or gender or I practice a certain religion, everybody who is in that is the same. And that's the conversation we're trying to get away from. And we're seeing that happen in the case law as well. So just be aware that the moment you start making a broad generalization, even if it's backed by data, remember that you're looking at individuals.
Thank you. And that goes right into our next slide of promotions. And Coca-Cola wishes they would have done this, I bet. Clear objective criteria that can be measured. That's the word I was searching for, was criteria, whatever. Document the process so that if you ever need to go back, you can do that. Promote a culture of feedback. So whether it's anonymous or, I mean, you should have some anonymous feedback, but also employees should know where they stand at all times. Consider promotion panels, just like you might have a hiring panel, you could consider a promotion panel. Not to do, lack of transparency, secrecy, and decision-making. I've seen this happen at places where I've consulted, where it's like, there's a new person. It's like, oh, I didn't know there was an opening. And they just have it. Inconsistent criteria that, letting some people skate and other people can't skate on, the objective criteria. Repeated favoritism. If you see in the hiring, if you see demographic patterns in who is not hiring, who is being promoted, take a look at that, dig deeper. And then some, if there's unexplained career stagnation, look at that. You look for qualified people whose careers seem to have been moving slowly or have stopped for no apparent reason. So anything.
And I want to throw in something else on the promotions that I see a lot on both sides is both the managers doing the promoting and the employees see promotion as kind of a reward. And what you need to be thinking about is the objective criteria. Again, can this person that you want to promote perform the essential functions of the next level that you want to promote them to? I get that you want to honor the employees that bring their A game to the role that they're in, but you also end up a lot of times if you promote them and they don't necessarily have all the skills and abilities and you're not willing to do the training for them to do that, then you're setting them up for failure and you're setting your business up for a potential lawsuit and a major loss of a great employee.
Thank you. So let's get to the activate part. Executive order considerations. And this goes for hiring, and this is repeat from our other one. So I'm going to go through it kind of quickly, but stay grounded in the federal laws, which is the Civil Rights Act, ADEA, and others, which are unchanged at this point. Conduct a policy review of your DEI programs. And this is one thing that Anthony kind of alluded to in the beginning there is what are your policies? What's your culture mission? Is it in line? Stay informed about legal and policy changes. And I know Nancy always says here, make sure you have a local attorney.
And that's everywhere that you have a worker who could be deemed an employee. And I say it that way because I do a lot in the worker misclassification space. And employers, as you know, or I should say businesses, we'll say businesses often will hire workers and call everybody an independent contractor. And you just need to make sure that they qualify as an independent contractor in the state where they are working. And especially in the world where so many people are working remotely. If they are working, for example, from Minnesota, it's going to be different than from when they're working in New York. And you need to make sure you're aware of where your employees are moving, because we've seen that happen right before the 1099s went out at the end of the year and the W-2s went out. We found out that some workers had moved to a new state. So when that happens, you need to make sure that you have employment counsel in that state to ensure that you're in compliance with that particular worker.
Oh, sorry, that is me, and I will make that go away. Reinforce your company's core values. Do you have fairness and belonging in the values somewhere? So, do that. Education and training, and where this, obviously in the DEI world, education and training was, a big part of it, bias training and whatnot. But what we're seeing in our Spectra data is that the training actually needs to go to the management, is the ones that seem to be out of sync. So if you are only going to do some training, I would focus that training on management, because they're the ones that are supposed to be implementing whatever your company policies are. And if they don't know how to do that in an inclusive way, you could get in trouble.
And I'll throw in that I use a four-part method when I'm doing training. I call it CAR. So that's, you deliver the knowledge, and that's where a lot of programs will stop. They think you just deliver the knowledge and everybody checks the box and they get a certificate and voila, we're good and we're going to not have any problems. That's not where it ends, right? So after you deliver the knowledge, there's usually an application of that knowledge, right? So that's where you do role plays. You give people an opportunity in kind of a laboratory, safe, knowledge-filled environment to practice. Because if you don't, people think they know how it's going to play out. And you know what humans do? They act on what they've always done. So that's what we don't want them to do, because they wouldn't need the training otherwise, right? So you give them a chance to apply it, feel it in their entire body, see what goes wrong when they try it out with each other and they use the wrong words and how it can come off differently in different environments. Then you want to reinforce that training, right? And that means once you get out in the workplace, being consistent about it. And then that other R is to resolve whatever conflicts come up as timely as possible. That's the other thing I see as a lawyer frequently is people will kind of step over what they think are these small conflicts based on their own experience. And that's almost always the one that will keep escalating until it becomes a lawsuit. And it's all something that could usually be, I realize that's a couple of broad generalizations there. Let me rephrase it. It's almost always fixable in conversation at the lower level.
And the point about reinforcing and remeasuring things or redoing things, that in our assessments that we do, there's hardly any of the assessments that we've done do the people or do the organizations remeasure to see if, because there's all these different score points, data points, and they hardly ever measure, like, did we move the needle? We've done some training, we've added ERGs, we've done this, that, and the other thing. Did we move the needle? Is management better? Are the Black employees feeling more included? All those are data points, and there's an opportunity to see if you moved them, and if you did move them, which some of the companies that I've worked for, they have moved them. And then it's something that you can publicize internally to your employees, to keep that momentum going, or externally to, your stakeholders and your customers. So there's that. Engage, we just talked about that. Communicate proactively. So you want to emphasize stability and the company's commitment to fostering an equitable workplace or an inclusive workplace, and then maintain your DEI efforts strategically. So rather than a lot of organizations, they just put DEI when it was there, they put it under HR, but it really should be, it's in the hiring, it's performance, it's leadership. It should be, part of your marketing plan. It should be, the DEI head, whoever that person is, should not be under HR, but perhaps report directly to, that would be part of the executive team. So I'm going to move on because we did something. So what can organizations do? And this is, Nancy, this is all you.
So yes, it's definitely, you want to consult legal counsel, as I mentioned, anywhere that you have employees or someone working for you who could be deemed an employee. And that includes the independent contractors. I've heard them called freelancers, permalancers, subcontractors. Vendors could also be, believe it or not, deemed your employee in some states. Though you want to make sure that you know about that. That may also come, just as an aside, with some additional requirements for things like mandatory training. Because I'm licensed in New York, we have mandatory training for sexual harassment prevention, for example. And that is something, if you're misclassifying a worker, you may end up in some trouble also with not training, not providing sick pay, et cetera. And you want to make sure that you have insurance for the various workers as well. You may want to ensure that you have an employer liability policy that might cover some of your missteps. And the reason I bring that up, also two other benefits, not only would insurance a lot of times cover a claim in the horrible situation that you end up there, you may, one, get that duty to defend, so they will appoint you an attorney who's skilled in your type of case. But a lot of insurance brokers are also doing training of their insureds these days to help you stay out of the courtroom. So it turns out to be a huge benefit. You know, obviously insurance companies don't want to pay out claims. So one of the ways that they're avoiding that is by offering training in the particular area that they're insuring. So I say do that. Obviously, this is where Chris comes in as well, and probably Anthony and Lee and a few other of you on here. It's making sure you're auditing your programs, looking at your initiatives, your statements, reviewing them with legal counsel. So I like to throw in that some of the people that, I should say, some of the organizations that are being boycotted for taking their DEI statements down and things like that, before you cancel them, give them an opportunity to see if they're going to change course as well. There are some that have already taken stances, but understand that as legal counsel, I may have told some of my clients to take their statements down and rework them, and let's look at them before you put them out there and have the Department of Justice filing a criminal complaint against you. So be aware of that. We're looking for, in particular, illegal and divisive elements, because those are the words that have been used in a lot of the executive orders and some of the other initiatives. Those are relatively vague terms, but I think what the Ames case that came down last week is trying to point out is that if you're using any of the bases that are covered under Title VII as part of your hiring decisions, there's a good chance that you could be found to be discriminating. So that's why we always go back to those objective criteria. And can the candidate or the employee do the essential functions of the job? And then you have to be looking at, what are you doing to help them succeed in the role you're putting them in, right? You can't just hire somebody and put them in something that they're not skilled at and then expect them to perform extremely well, because you may find that that would also land you in hot water if, for example, you're only hiring women for jobs you know women can't do, or not that women can't do certain jobs, but there's a height requirement, and all the women you're hiring are a certain, or I should say a lifting requirement, and all of the women you're hiring are unable to lift that, and then you fire them for not lifting that. That's what we're looking for, is, are you orchestrating some sort of discrimination? But sometimes you do that because of your own biases. So this is why an audit by somebody that does this work can be critical to your organization.
And can you, you said the Ames decision, just happened last week?
Yes,
What did they decide?
so they did decide, as we anticipated, that if there is a hiring decision or an employment decision, and I'm paraphrasing, that they remanded the case. So as far as what's going to happen in Ames's case particularly, it remains to be seen if she'll win, but they had dismissed her case because there was a higher burden of proof that was applied to avoid a motion to dismiss. And there was a higher burden of proof saying, because she was a white woman basically and cisgender, that she had a higher burden of proof because she was in a majority population. And therefore, the Supreme Court said, no, you can't have different standards.
Okay, Lee, you had a question?
Yeah, Nancy, this stems from a statement you made a few minutes ago about um, discrimination. Potentially, it could be intentional to force people out, but then it could be not intentional, but there's an organization can still be at risk, right?
That is true. So we are still, I will tell you that the current federal administration has an initiative from what we have heard and seen. There is an initiative to try to remove disparate impact from discrimination cases, but currently that is still in place. So we do still look for disparate impact, meaning that you might not be aware of your biases playing out in your workplace, which is also why you would want to maybe hire somebody like Spectra, but you might be discriminating unknowingly because your biases are hidden from you. And that happens in organizations that are at least appear to be relatively homogenous. It's, it is where you're hiring all your buddies from schools you went to, right? Oh, everybody here went to this type of group, or, oh, that's my friend, so I hire all my friend and family members. And what I tell employers all the time is, yes, you're entitled to run your business however you want, but not without consequences. So you want to be aware of these things, and usually doing an assessment will help you avoid the inequities that get you sued.
And the next one obviously is near and dear to my heart. Conduct assessments to identify the inequities in your organization. One of my favorite stories here is one of our change partners was called in to do some training on race. And she said, sure, she could do that, but why don't we measure first to see where the issues might be? And it turned out that they did not have a race problem. They did have a generational problem. Their oldies and their youngies did not have the same belief systems. They didn't agree, and they were in conflict. When I look at the data, it's almost as plain as the nose on your face, where, which groups of people are feeling excluded. And, how to fix that varies depending on who they are in the organization, obviously. But, rather than just having a feeling that there's some inequities in the organization, you would have actual data, both qualitative and quantitative. So I love that bullet point, Nancy. And here's the next one. Consider why you had DEI goals in the first place before the executive orders and bans.
Yeah, and I think that's the big one. So although I'm obviously telling you what the big pain point I see is, that people come to me after they're going to get sued, or they're afraid they're going to get sued. And yes, you need to consider those things because it could bankrupt your organization. The cases can be very costly. But to Anthony's point or earlier is, you're looking at not just the legal side, you're looking at the moral side, and you're looking at your own values, and where do you want to stand? There
And
is
the
room to stand strong on your values if you value DEI.
and it affects your culture. It is
Absolutely.
your culture. Yeah.
It absolutely is. And we're in denial if we think the world is not already diverse. And learning how to navigate that powerfully has the benefit of including. One of the rules that I like to also use is, if you're excluding anywhere, then obviously you have an inclusion problem, right? So that's the first place to look, is where are you excluding? And that can be economic level, it can be family status level, it can be so many different things. And underneath that, a lot of times can be a hidden bias that is causing a disparate impact. That's why we do the objective data.
Yep. Thank you. So, lead. What can you do? So, are you employed by an organization? Well, you can notify your employer promptly of unfair policies and document what is happening. You can exhibit the behaviors you want to receive. You can speak up when you're being disrespected, and you can develop your persuasion and conflict resolution skills.
And
Yeah.
I'll add that going back to some of the training, what we've found, and I believe that there are several studies that are now supporting this, is that the basic knowledge delivery of, for example, how to recognize discrimination or sexual harassment might not be as important now as the bystander intervention, because most people do know what discrimination and sexual harassment look like. They don't always know what to do when they witness it. And so having bystander intervention can cut down on a lot of the problems in your workplace as well. If you give people paths to report, to do fair and impartial investigations, to resolve complaints and in fair ways, then you'll find that your employees will tell you about problems before they become major lawsuits.
And if you hire people, you should, and we just talked about this, ensure that your job descriptions, the interview process and hiring is based on the essential functions of the job. Use hiring committees and matrices. Make the decisions objective and evidence database, and follow up to ensure that your new hires are getting the orientation, the ongoing training, and other support that they need to succeed. And we've said, anything else to add there? We've kind of covered that.
Yeah, I'll just throw one other thing in there is when you're thinking about training and evaluating new employees, and this is really all employees, is don't forget to ask them what they need to feel like they're successful in their role. That's a valuable question that's very open-ended, and what you'll find a lot of times is people may not know, so they might say, I'm not sure, but I'm having trouble with X. And that's where you'll start to flesh out these issues before they become major conflicts and performance issues. It's a wonderful way to invest back into your employees so that the hiring investment you've made is you get that return in both directions. Because my thing is employment is a partnership that should be mutually beneficial.
Okay, and if you're outside of an organization, what can you do? Well, if shareholders, you can use your votes if you own shares in a company. Consumers, vote with your dollar. I do this. There's an app called Goods Unite Us, and it's a free app, and I use it in my shopping. It tells me, like, if I need to go to a grocery store, it tells me which ones are DEI friendly and which ones are not. Same with airlines and all kinds of other categories. So I use that. And then do your research. No defamation, no doxing, no violence. That is definitely happening in all the comments that I'm seeing in social media about LA right now, and maybe the No Kings protests on the 14th, that nonviolence, if you see violence happening around you, I have heard that what you should do is sit down, because sitting down is non-confrontational, non-violent, and it's a very visual message if you just sit yourself down. We've got some resources for you here, and I'm going to share this when we're all done so you can see what these are. I don't know if I can put them on the chat from a single screen. That's hard to do.
And
So
if it's okay, Chris, I'm going to also invite, because I know there are some people on here who are also resources. So feel free if you want to put your
your
information in the
LinkedIn or
chat for the
whatever.
other
Yeah.
attendee.
And this is the closing poll. What can you commit to doing? Like, we've just talked about a number of things, but what can you do to promote equity and diversity in the talent life cycle? Like, what can you start doing today, tomorrow? It's Monday.
Start today. Why not?
Start today. So
Still early in the day. There's still lots you can do today.
there is. So what I'm committing to doing is Well, obviously this, and I'm releasing, Spectra is gonna have a new product in the third quarter, which is going to be inclusive leadership. And it's specifically for leaders. Survey staff for their feedback. You know what? I did a survey. We did one, I think it was last fall, but they had a bunch of people that didn't have company email addresses. And they wanted to know how to get feedback from those people. And I said, well, you could do it the old fashioned way. Give them a paper survey that they can fill out. They put it in a blank envelope. Those blank envelopes are collected and then they sent them to Spectra. And we entered the data, and boy, oh boy, did those people, they had some significant feedback, and they had never been asked for share the DEI for Real guide in the chat. Yes, we will.
That's what I'm doing. I did that. So it's in the
Oh,
chat.
you did that. Oh, okay, thank you.
That
Oh,
was my
was you.
comment.
That was you. Okay. But yeah, if you ask people, you know, especially the staff, the boots on the ground, it's a good way to go. Continue.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that a little bit, is that it's another thing that Chris and I say and we talk about regularly. I think some of you hear us probably talk about this ad nauseum, but the big thing as an employer and an organization is focus on the inequities within your control. And if you're running an organization, that is where you have control. So start there. And I think a lot of businesses, although well-meaning sometimes, got down the rabbit hole basically of trying to fix things that already occurred, and then they just did performative things and they just started to look good. So what we're looking at here is go inside, find out where your problems are and fix them. I love that you want to try and fix more in the world, but it starts with fixing the things that are within your purview.
And this is, and we are at our time. Next month or next session, also in June, ERGs. Are they legal? The fine line between advocacy and liability. It promises to be fascinating. And I want to close with this. Diversity is a fact, equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, and belonging is an outcome. I love that definition, short and sweet and to the point. And I want to thank you for being here with us today, and hope to see you next time. We will be putting this on, I put it on my YouTube channel, and so does Nancy. And so you could refer people to view it that couldn't come or that might be interested in it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a great day and have a great week.
Okay. Bye all.